Live Formula One.
Welcome to Miami, and guys, is this not the best place? We've potentially done a podcast. We're sitting in the middle of the Hard Rock Stadium, 75,000 seater. Andrew Benson, this is your starring moment.
Well, Jenny, I have to say there are other places I'd rather be sitting, to be honest, but I do like this race.
Come on.
Well, come on, we're in the middle of a concrete football stadium. You know, I could be sitting on a hill in the Himalayas, you know, or
For once, I
watching a
thought
sunset somewhere.
I'd
or...
appeal to your musical nature and capture the star that you wanted to be. But no, he wants to be in the Himalayas.
You misread my character very badly there, Jenny.
I'd rather be on the Kintetsu line on the way back from Suzuka, personally.
Well, I'm sorry.
I played that game this year already.
I'm glad that you've made the effort, guys, to come all the way to Miami to sit at the home of Miami Dolphins, but you're bearing with it, Andrew, remarkably well.
Yeah, so they've actually done a really good thing with this race. The drivers aren't the best fans of the track. I don't think anybody's the best fans of the track. But the paddock is right in the middle of the Hard Rock Stadium, as you say, Jenny. They put some artificial grass down. All the teams have these little sort of cabanas, if you like. And there's a big sort of grassy area where we can all mill and mingle and chat to people, and all sorts of other little secret spots where sort of just beyond here, there's a little place where they do free food. They were doing burgers today. Sometimes it's pizza. And then beyond that, there's a sort of garagey area, and then the media centre's up in the stadium itself, looking over the pitch. So it's a unique race, and Formula One has really embraced it. There's a lot of sort of sponsorship activations, as they described them in Formula One this weekend, because it's such an important market in the States, and because Miami is such a glamorous location.
Personally, when it comes to the track, I can take or leave it, but all the other things around it I really love. I love the paddock setup. I wasn't here in the first year, so I don't know what the previous one was like apart from just seeing it online, but I really like the vibe that goes on here. But this is a place where, and maybe the American races in general, it feels like it's more entertainment first, F1 cars racing second, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, because sport is entertainment and entertainment can be sport, but it's very much what event is on South Beach tonight, where are you heading to Miami this evening. It is very much glitz and glamour. All the influences from everywhere are here every evening. There's an event almost every hour in the evening across the weekend. It's very much an event with a motor race.
Yes, it's a compromise event from what Formula One's original vision for it was. What they wanted was a street race downtown, which went over one of the bridges towards the Miami Beach area. They couldn't get that across the line because the residents sort of kicked off. So they've ended up in this sort of constructed track around a stadium in a car park, effectively, although it's not like a car park race like in Las Vegas in 1981 and 1982.
No, don't get there.
But they've tried to bring the sort of Miami vibe and Miami glamour that we all know about from, you know, famous TV series and what have you, and Hollywood films, into this area and sort of stick it onto the race. And they've done a really good job of it. And there's an American race for all tastes, I think. This is very much an event, as you say. Austin is the kind of enthusiasts US Grand Prix. It is the US Grand Prix. And then you've got Las Vegas, which is just Vegas.
I don't know what that is.
It's this place times a million, isn't it? And
you don't know what time it is, or where you are half the time.
Exactly. But everybody really enjoys being here, even though there's plenty of compromisers around it.
And race 6 of the 2025 season, and the championship seems to be living up to its expectation. When we first started out, Oscar Piastri leads now by 10 points. It's the first time he has led a championship. It's the first time Australians led a championship since Mark Webber. You remember that, Benson?
It wasn't that long ago, Jenny.
No, it wasn't.
15 years in 2010. It didn't quite work out for Webber back then. At the moment, it's going really well, though, for his protege. Mark and his wife, Anne Neal, took on Oscar Piastri when he was about 14 years old, and have sort of nurtured him ever since. And obviously, there's a whole bunch of interesting dynamics and narratives about this. You've got McLaren's continued revival after last year when they won the championship for the first time in donkey's years. You've got two drivers who've never won the championship. They're relatively young in Formula One, relatively young in age, going at it head to head. very contrasting personalities. Norris wears his heart on his sleeve. Piastri's very solid. I'm not saying Norris isn't solid, but he's not externally emotive in the way that Norris is. And then in the background, of course, you've got Max Verstappen sort of delivering every weekend in the Red Bull, which isn't quite on the level of the McLaren, but it's close enough to allow Verstappen to be in the mix as well. And then, of course, there's the Ferrari narrative and the Mercedes narrative, and Russell and Hamilton versus Leclerc, and so there's a lot to get our teeth into this year.
I think McLaren are the team to beat, hands down. I think that's been seen so far over the course of the first few races, and as this championship battle develops, we're fully expecting it to be Norris versus Piastri. But it is that dynamic that I'm so intrigued by. I know a lot is made of the differences, but I love Oscar Piastri's vibe. I think that stability that he appears to have in the background, whether that's in his home and personal life, whether that's his general upbringing and demeanour, he's got Mark Webber in his corner, but even when it comes down to things like, he's had the same girlfriend since he was at school. He's got a stable kind of lifestyle. He's not loud, and he's got this get on with the job and see how it goes. There's no denying his pace whatsoever. Whereas Lando, in a different way, is incredibly raw and fast, and he's got that pace. But I do think it's going to boil down to inherently the differences in how they approach a weekend and what goes on in particular in the weeks where they're not racing and how they're preparing for those.
Yeah, Piastri's is a really intriguing character. Someone at work the other day described him to me as the most boring man on earth.
Wow, I thought that was you.
Well, thanks very much, Jenny. But he really isn't that. He's got a really great dry sense of humour.
Much like you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. You've got to tune yourself into it a little bit and get to know him a little bit. And it's beginning to flower a little bit. But I think we shouldn't underestimate. It'd be easy to characterise it as the sort of the super talent with the slightly flighty personality against the solid, not quite so extremely talented one. But that would be wrong on lots of different levels, most of the levels. In fact, that phrase, everything you've just said is wrong. It would be like that. So Piastri's a very, very talented guy. But what has happened over the winter is that whereas last year Norris was very comfortable in the car and Piastri was only in his second year, let's not forget, he set himself the target, Piastri, over the winter, of ironing out all the areas where he felt he wasn't performing as well as he could. When he was at his peak last year, he was every bit as good as Norris. So what he wanted to do was access that peak more often, and he's absolutely done that. So, of course, actually the question is, while we've been hearing Norris talking about, I don't like this about the car or that about the car, is it actually that? Or is it just that Piastri's raised his level a little bit this year? There's no actual answer to that. It's probably a bit of both.
Well, I spoke to the Aussie earlier on today and spoke about how his attitude's changed coming into this race. Now he is championship leader.
No, it doesn't change much. I think we knew going into this year that we were going to have a strong car. Both myself and Lando fighting for a world championship ideally. So, we had a lot of those kind of discussions before the season. I think, if there's a points gap and competition from outside the team later in the season, then yes, obviously there'll be discussions had. But I think whilst it's us two battling for a championship, hopefully, then we'll get the same opportunities, same car to go and win a world championship.
I just wonder, with that 10-point gap, do you prefer being out in front and being the leader, or do you prefer to be the chaser?
I don't mind either. They both come with their positives and negatives, but I think generally if you're the hunted, then you're doing something right. So I'm pretty happy in this position, pretty comfortable in this position, and again, I try not to really think about that too much, because the best way of not being hunted down is by trying to win more races. So that's kind of the plan. I think it's still incredibly early in the year for that to have much significance, but I think the kind of results behind the championship position and the effort behind that is what I'm very proud of so far and very satisfied with. So that's the thing we're going to try and keep rolling, and then hopefully the championship picture continues to go with it.
So, Andrew, you were in the press conference when he was speaking as well. He's done his media duties today. What did you pick up from him?
Well, I asked him specifically that issue about Norris versus him and what's happened to change the performance balance between the two of them. And what he said was, I feel like I've taken a step forward across the board. The car's an evolution from what we had last year. Some things are different, but there's a lot of things that are still the same. There's not been one specific thing that I tried to work on from last year. It's just been trying to find those last hundredths of a second wherever you can, and that's been making the difference. I've still lost out on a few poles, so I still have some more digging to do, but that's been the biggest difference for me so far. And that's kind of what I was saying just a minute ago about let's not diminish the transformation that he's managed to find for himself over the winter, Piastri, and the work that he's put that has gone in to make that happen.
I think it's impressive, isn't it, when you look at him and realise how green he is to this paddock, to this lifestyle of being an F1 driver. 2 years, and already he's putting himself in pole position to be able to challenge for this championship and shift the dynamic, shift the dialogue from being focused on Lando, the young Brit who was going to challenge Max Verstappen last year and is challenging again this year, to actually it's Oscar. No one really knows much about Oscar. It's hard to get much information about him, really. But actually, he has put himself in that position.
You walk past him on the street, you'd think normal bloke. Formula Renault Euro Cup champion in his first year. Formula 3 champion first year. Formula 2 champion first year. F1 reserve for Alpine. Then, by an amazing stroke of, maybe
incompetence.
I was about to say luck. Maybe luck on the Piastri side and incompetence from the Alpine HR side, let's say. He gets out of that contract and gets the McLaren drive. And after a rookie season where he is outshone by Lando Norris, he shows flashes of pace, but he's got problems. He's trying to get his head around tyre degradation and managing his tyres, and that bled a little bit into his second year as well. But the car constantly improving, constantly getting better. But in that first year, it wasn't championship material. But as we've documented, the McLaren story is one that is rising and rising and rising. And now, when McLaren are back on top, constructors champions, Piastri has raised his game in his third season now of Formula One, and he is nailing it as far as I'm concerned.
And we haven't even talked about his racing ability. Even last year, his racing ability was right up there at the very highest level. He did probably the two best overtaking moves of last year, were both by him.
Great.
Yeah, so that was on Norris on the first lap of the Italian Grand Prix, and then on Leclerc, Charles Leclerc, the Ferrari driver, to win eventually the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And he's proved it again this year with the move that won the race effectively in Jeddah 2 weeks ago, when he got alongside Max Verstappen. Verstappen earned himself a penalty by cutting across the runoff area. It's basically take no prisoners, decisive, clinical, clean, aggressive, and he's added consistent speed to that. He's a really formidable opponent for anybody.
Does that cause McLaren a problem though? Because now
Not yet.
They have two out-and-out number one drivers.
Well, I mean, all credit to McLaren. They're letting it play out. And they're trying not to interfere. They want them to race. That's ingrained in the ethos of the company. They don't have a number one driver like Red Bull have constructed that team to have since Verstappen arrived there. And that means that even if McLaren dominate the rest of the season, there's at least a fight between the two drivers. I don't think McLaren are going to dominate it completely. Verstappen's going to keep in the frame. I think, let's hope Mercedes and Ferrari can improve as well. But we don't know whether it's going to cause tension. Historically, you would say it will. And Zak Brown, the CEO of McLaren Racing, has already said he expects them to crash together at some point. But they've handled them with such equity so far and with such careful, mature management from Brown and Andrea Stella, the team principal, that even if it comes to blows, I could be wrong, but it feels like they'll be able to keep a lid on that tension better than some people have done in the past.
Well, let's hear from Lando Norris, 10 points behind his teammate Oscar Piastri in the standings.
I mean, I'm working on my things. I'm working on what to improve and trying to figure out all the things behind the scenes on what I need to do better on. It's certainly not because of a lack of speed or lack of ability to do so. You know, I've often led the way in Q1 and Q2, but always when I've got to Q3, then it's not gone to plan.
So this time last year, almost to the day, Lando had his first ever Formula One win here in Miami. The turnaround that's happened at McLaren has been well documented, well spoken about on this podcast alone. But just thinking about Lando, does he need to re-establish himself, Harry, as the championship favourite? Because a lot of damage, I feel, has been done over the last few races.
I don't know. I don't think he needs to re-establish himself. And look, and this current Formula One, 0.003 of a second can separate 3 positions almost at times on a grid. We're talking hundreds, thousands of a second that are separating the top 10 at times. So it's so easy. But, you know, okay, this is Formula One. We're here to scrutinise those gaps. They are much bigger in F1 terms. But I think, look, there's something still that Lando, up until this weekend, we're still going to find out that he's not quite comfortable with that McLaren yet, especially through a corner, getting the front gripping as much as he would like and getting it as sharp as he would like. It's not quite where he wants it to be yet. That's not costing him tenths. It's costing him a few thousands, and that's what's setting him back at the moment. So I think once he gets on top of that, and from what I've heard so far this weekend, his demeanour seems fairly pragmatic, and he knows that he hasn't been as on the pace as he would like to have been, and if he's going to continue to challenge for his first world title, he needs to solve these issues with the car and be back on par with Oscar Piastri. But I don't think he has got a massive point to prove. I just think he's got to understand and unlock that last little bit from the car, and then he'll be right there.
Andrew, does it damage a driver to be as open as Lando has been? He's talked a lot about mental health. He really speaks from the heart. And for me, it's the exact opposite of how Piastri handles himself.
Well, actually, Piastri himself had an interesting answer to that question today. It wasn't exactly that question, but it was addressing the same topic. It was basically saying that you have to be yourself. And the only way to be your best is to be yourself. And when you start to try and change the way you are naturally, that's when the problems start to appear. And that's why it's so interesting. Norris is being himself. He's very open about his frailties and weaknesses. It's not a usual personality trait for a Formula One driver. The sort of cliched sort of sense of a Formula One driver is that they never make mistakes. In fact, racing drivers generally, there's a joke within motorsport that a racing driver is always looking for an excuse of one kind or another. Norris doesn't do that at all, and he's very similar in that way to Charles Leclerc at Ferrari. They're both, very much upfront when they make a mistake. They don't hide from the fact that it's on them rather than on the team or the car or whatever. And I think McLaren appreciate that honesty from him. And I don't think it's for anyone to judge whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing for him. It's whatever works for him. What his problem is, though, is that all the way through his career, he's always been blindingly fast, Norris. But there've been like little hints of frailty. And you saw it last year when he was trying to keep up with Verstappen in the championship, or close the gap to Verstappen in the championship. Just only tiny little things, but a start that didn't go quite so well here, or leaving the door open for Piastri on the first lap in Monza, for example. And then it's happened again this year with the crash. That was a big mistake, obviously, in qualifying in Saudi Arabia, pushing too hard when actually that was the first weekend in 3 races where he'd looked like the faster McLaren driver again. He admits he makes these mistakes. He doesn't try and hide them in the way that other drivers do. And we're watching a human being grow into himself in public with the biggest, most powerful spotlight on him that there possibly can be. And that's what makes it so interesting.
It's fascinating to watch. Well, speaking about people whose lives are playing out in public, probably need to mention Lewis Hamilton, because it seems like it's not going his way since joining Ferrari. Yes, he's had the high of that sprint win in China, but apart from that, it seems like bleak times.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's contextualise it, Jenny. He has had the win in China. He's won a race. You know, it's only a sprint, but he's still won a race, and he won it from pole position. And he impressed his teammate Charles Leclerc in doing so. He said Lewis had outperformed the car for that half of the weekend. The problem is that he's very much not been outperforming the car for the rest of the season, and Leclerc's had the better of him, and that's why we're seeing grumpy Lewis Hamilton in public, because you know he has high expectations of himself in the same way that everybody has high expectations of him. He simply hasn't got to terms yet with the entirety of the Ferrari experience, whether it's the car or the team, working together with the team to improve the car. They're not in a position themselves competitively that they expected to be either, which doesn't help. In a way, though, I think it would be even worse if they were, because Leclerc will be winning races and then Hamilton might still be struggling. So probably better to be struggling when the whole team's struggling than when the team's absolutely competitive. But, you know, he wants to improve, and I think what he doesn't see at the moment is the way to improve. And he says it's going to take time, and I guess we just have to wait and see how long that time is.
I mean, he spoke in the press conference today, but I think the word speak is going over the top, because single word answers, it's hard for our producer to cobble something together that made any sense, because he was just not into it.
Well, that's what you get from Hamilton when he's not competitive and when he's not competitive with his teammate. We saw it a lot with his last 3 years at Mercedes. I don't doubt that it'll come good for him. It is surprising that someone of his talent and ability hasn't been able to adapt quicker. But a lot of the drivers are saying that to think that is to underestimate the complexity of modern Formula One, and that we can only take them at their word, I guess.
Carlos Sainz was saying he's not surprised to see Hamilton struggling in the same way that he's still trying to get to grips with the new team. There is something that needs to be said. When you move to a team after being in the same environment for over a decade, it's not going to happen overnight. It could take 6 months, and that's from March, the beginning of the season, really. So I think we still got to give this more time. But I think the second thing is that if we're really honest and we step back, Lewis Hamilton hasn't got on with this generation of car, really. This ground effect era of car, it hasn't suited his style. And I just wonder if there's an element of, let's get to the end of this year, really embed in the Ferrari environment, and then we start fresh 2026, and that will be the year that really tells us if Lewis Hamilton has still got what it takes.
Well, all there is at the moment are questions, aren't there?
Yeah.
So actually the first 2 years of the ground effect era, he was fine. He and Russell were basically evenly matched. Hamilton had the balance advantage in the first year, Russell in the second, but in terms of absolute average qualifying pace, for example, there was like hundredths between the pair of them, with one ahead one year and one ahead the other. It was last year that things started to go wrong, where Russell had that definitive edge established in qualifying, and we're seeing the same thing playing out now at Ferrari, with the added extra of the unfamiliarity with the new team making the gap bigger. He's 4/10 on average behind Leclerc over 5 Grand Prix so far in qualifying, and that is an awful lot for any Formula One driver to be behind their teammate, even if they're as good as Charles Leclerc. Yeah. And let's not forget, Charles Leclerc is an outstanding racing driver who is having an absolutely excellent start to the season. He's had some really good drives that have gone under the radar this year. Bahrain, he got a bit stuffed by the safety car, probably would have been on the podium there. He was on the podium in Saudi Arabia. He drove brilliantly with a broken front wing in China, which I can tell by your face, Harry, you'd forgotten about. Yeah, exactly. So he's got a high bar to meet, but he's Lewis Hamilton and he's expected to meet that high bar. We just have to watch and comment and report on that as he tries to do it.
And asking these questions on repeat is probably also why he's grumpy at the press conference.
I tell you what is impressive though, Ferrari's pit stops. I know this is coming a bit out of the blue,
impressive.
But 2 seconds. They've been the fastest pit stop every race this season. And you feel like they are slick. This hasn't happened to them a lot And all of a sudden, they're getting themselves together. They're preparing. They're laying down the foundations for what they hope is the future. I'm just really impressed by that.
Well, what they hoped this year was that they had already laid down the foundations, and that this will be a season of consistent championship challenge. Over the win. Let's not forget they came within 16 points, was it, of the Constructors' Championship last year against McLaren, and that was after quite a difficult start to the season. And Fred Vasseur, the team principal, was saying before the start of the season they expected this year to carry on as last season had ended, with the top 4 teams sort of trading, being in the best competitive position from one race to the next. And the drivers were expecting to mount a season-long title challenge, but that's not where they are. So they've got themselves operationally in a good place, but they haven't got the car, competitively in a good place. And I think that's been a surprise for them. Basically, they've made progress with the car. They just haven't made as much progress as McLaren have. And they're suffering for that now.
Some of the Mercedes team are just walking past this engineering and corporate hospitality suite. They're in an interesting place. George Russell, he's snuck in some sturdy performances, and I just feel like if something goes wrong for other people, he's always there to pick up the pieces. So he'd be my sneaky watch for the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think after the first couple of races, the memes online were how George Russell always somehow accidentally ends up on the podium due to others' misfortune. But I mean, much like actually we've underestimated Charles Leclerc's, not underestimated, he's just gone under the radar with his brilliant start to the season. What hasn't gone under the radar is George Russell's brilliant start to the season. And Mercedes feel like they've finally got the car just about right in this ground effect era, right at the very end of it, but better late than never.
Irony.
They are still missing that little extra, that little bit something to challenge McLaren and Max Verstappen for consistent podiums and race wins. But, I wonder if they're going to bring maybe a couple of upgrades over the next few races, which we're going to expect from the likes of Ferrari and McLaren too, before I imagine the teams will then fully shift to 2026. This next few races is going to be really key to see if Mercedes can make that jump. And if things go wrong ahead of them, I don't see why George Russell can't win a race.
So what do you reckon? Who does this track suit, Harry?
Well, McLaren. It's going to go the way of McLaren. I wonder if the high temperatures might affect the likes of Red Bull. But I think this is McLaren's track. I think they will go well here, and I'm struggling to see past that, personally.
Just on that note, where we're sat here, Red Bull, Max Verstappen didn't talk to the media. He's currently on a plane flying to Miami. His partner is expecting a baby sometime around now. We haven't heard from him. But he will be here by this weekend. He will take part in practice and sprint qualifying and the sprint races, and he will, Andrew, always be a threat.
Yeah, I mean, he's third in the championship. He's won a race.
He's kind of good.
Yeah, and I expect McLaren to be the team to beat, but I think it is close. All the qualifying sessions so far have been decided by hundredths. Verstappen was on pole in Japan. He was nearly on pole in Jeddah. He had a terrible race in Bahrain. And I think what's interesting about this track and makes it difficult to know exactly how it's going to go is that it's split into sort of different characters over the 3 sectors. The first sector is quite high speed with some really tough corners. Then the second sector is all quite fiddly, and there's a really particularly awkward chicane. And then the last sector is basically one long straight. So I'm really intrigued to see how the 4 teams play, how the balance of competitiveness plays out between the 4 of them, with the caveat that everybody expects McLaren to be in front.
Harry, you haven't run a track yet. Is that on your list of things to do this weekend?
Me and Benson are doing it right after this, Jenny.
Really?
Yeah.
That is strong, because I know you have run this track, and you did it with Jolyon Palmer?
I did. We don't talk about Jolyon anymore, though.
With
on this
Jolyon
podcast.
Palmer might be a bit of a stretch.
Well, no. With Jolyon down to turn 1. And then I met him back at the commentary box 20 minutes after he'd finished. But may I add, he was out of breath, as was I. but we completed it. I'm not running this track. Absolutely.
No?
It basically,
Neither am I.
it's the back straight, which is over 1.2 kilometers. That is hell on earth because you can see the end, but it almost feels like you're never getting to the end. And I was being overtaken by Gasly and Bottas. It was not a pretty sight. So I might get up a golf buggy and see if I can go around it like that in future.
Build up a sweat. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. Very exciting news this weekend. Damon Hill will be joining us in the commentary box, gives his expert punditry. Harry, looking forward to that.
Yeah, 1996 F1 World Champion in the box. It'd be amazing.
Cool. Very cool. Coverage of this weekend begins at 5:25 on Friday afternoon with FP1. The race is on Sunday on 5 Live. Lights out at 9 p.m. Build up from 8 p.m. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.
Quickly, should I tell Damon I wasn't born the year he won his championship? Yay or nay?
Yeah, just rub it in straight before you start commentary. Just say, "Hi, Damon. I don't know who you are. I wasn't born."
Lovely stuff.